It's felt like all we've been talking about is rain over the past few months, but how much rain have we seen since the start of autumn, and how much more rain is there to come this week? There's also a light at the end of the tunnel, just in time for Christmas. I've got all of that to share with you today in this week's Deep Dive. Welcome along. I'm Annie. I'm a presenter and meteorologist here at Met Office HQ in Exeter. If you watch every week, welcome back. If you're new to these deep dives, we do them every Tuesday, and they're an opportunity to talk about everything the weather in just a little bit more detail with a little bit more time. So please subscribe, comment on the videos if you enjoy them. Also comment if you've got any questions about what we talk about today or just anything else that's going on at the moment. We will read your comments and we might be answering your questions in our weather studio live on Friday. But this week we are talking about the rain, and as I said, it has felt like it's been raining for months, ever since September started, or autumn started, with a bang. Now, throughout the year so far, the UK as a whole has been running at a deficit for rain after a fairly exceptionally dry spring and summer. But since September, we've seen some fairly continuous rainfall with some pretty notable events, particularly Storm Claudia and Storm Bram just last week. Now, how is the UK's rainfall accumulation looking at the moment? Well, here you can see this year so far, 2025, obviously we're approaching the very end of the year, and how it's been running compared to average. That's this thick, straight, dark black line. That's the average, and where we see that brown colour, that's how much below average we've been so far this year. And actually, throughout the year as a whole, the UK has been below average. Now, it reached its driest point just at the end of the summer, just before September, and then since then we've seen a gradual increase in that difference between the average and 2025, a decrease in that difference. So it has become much closer to what we'd expect our average rainfall to be, but we're still at a deficit for the UK as a whole. Now, that's for the whole of the UK. That doesn't paint the picture across more regionally. You can see that here in this map. Now, it's pretty obvious. There's quite a stark picture here. You can see the difference between east to west. Eastern areas here are much drier than average still, and western areas are starting to become wetter than average. It's particularly parts of South Wales, Cornwall, North Wales, as well as northwest England, some areas of Northern Ireland and some far western areas of Scotland too. But particularly parts of northwest England, that's where we've seen some very exceptional rainfall recently. Just the weekend gone, we saw over 360 millimetres of rain accumulating in 2 days in Honister Pass in Cumbria. Now, that's not far off the record for a 2-day rolling rainfall accumulation that we saw in 2009 in Storm Desmond. That was in Cumbria as well. So some pretty exceptional rainfall totals across parts of Cumbria, but it's across South Wales where we've seen repeating flooding issues. We've had a number of amber warnings over the past couple of months across parts of South Wales, and that's where we have already seen the December rainfall amount across parts of South Wales as well as Cumbria. But we've already seen the annual rainfall amount as well. Let's look in more detail for South Wales, Southwest England, for how the rainfall has accumulated this year compared to average. It's a similar trend compared to the UK, that when we reached the end of summer, we reached our sort of driest period. Now, we haven't been as dry across western areas compared to eastern areas, but we've still been drier than average for much of this year. But the rainfall we've seen since September has really made a big headway into bringing rainfall accumulations much closer to average. And in fact, just in the past few days, we've gone above that average annual rainfall for this region. And that's because we've had a few events happen. As I said, Storm Claudia brought some intense flooding to Monmouth in particular, but we've also had Storm Bram as well, bringing that flooding as well to a similar area. And the rainfall has really built up as we've seen our weather fronts moving in from the south and west. The rainfall totals have really built up across southwestern areas. So it's not just South Wales, it's parts of Devon and Cornwall that are also seeing some continuous flooding risks and issues as well. And actually, over the past 3.5 months, since September until mid-December, we've seen 50% of the annual rainfall for this area fall. Now, of course, we're in the wettest period of the month. Autumn is always the wettest, as well as winter, but we'd usually expect to see around 60% of the annual rainfall fall over autumn and winter, and we've seen 50% in just 3.5 months. So we are ahead of the usual rate, and I think it's the amount of rainfall that we've seen in a short period of time that's led to those impacts, that continued risk of flooding as well. And we're starting to see rivers react, groundwater react as well. And there have been a number of issues with drought and hose pipe bans across the UK since the summer. And this is the latest UK hydrological outlook. This was from the beginning of December. Now, it says that anywhere west of this line has river flows and groundwater levels across the UK at normal levels or just above normal for the rest of December and into winter. And across the eastern side of this line, so parts of eastern England as well as much of northern Scotland, groundwater levels are still below their average amount, and they are likely to continue with that trend through the rest of the winter months. So that's why there's some big differences across the UK and as to water supply, and why some areas are still seeing some water restrictions. But it's definitely clear that across the west that there's continued risk of flooding. Water levels are recovering, and we will continue to see further rainfall this week, and there are a number of warnings in force for many western and southern parts of England. Let's have a closer look now at the weather for the rest of this week. So I'm going to start by showing you the bigger picture. Now, if you've watched any of our deep dives lately or 10-day trends, you'll know that we've been blaming everything on the jet stream, and it's the jet stream yet to blame for the consistently wet weather we're going to see through the rest of this week. You can see it's still really active as it moves across the Atlantic, pushing through low pressure systems, developing them, creating a breeding ground for these low pressure systems and sweeping weather fronts through. Now, I'll turn the jet stream off just so it's not too distracting, so we can just see what the pressure system is going to be doing for the rest of this week. So throughout Wednesday, we'll see a weather front move through the UK, but just before it actually clears the east of the UK, we start to see a wave developing on it. You can see the weather front here kinking back up, that warm front developing there. That's because it's reversing direction, so the warm air is starting to rise there. It's just slowing down a little bit. There we go, sped up again. And then that might take a little while to clear. There are some uncertainties on that, and there's also an occlusion here. Sometimes they don't bring many impacts, but we are expecting that occlusion to potentially bring some quite disruptive rain. That will eventually clear through at the end of Thursday. Then Friday, we've got low pressure nearby. It's still relatively unsettled, but definitely drier than Wednesday and Thursday. A lot of rain to come. There are warnings in force. And then we've still got a fairly mobile jet stream into this weekend. A low pressure system then brings in the next weather front. This time it brings quite a narrow band of intense rainfall that's moving in from the west once again. So it's going to be similar areas that have seen the rain over the past few months that will continue to see rain through the rest of this week and the weekend. As I said, there is a change on the way as we move into Christmas week, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. For now, let's put a few more details on the weather for the rest of this week. So I'm going to get the weather fronts on as well because they show the features quite nicely. So we've got that broad area of low pressure out to the north and west of the UK on Wednesday. That sweeps through these weather fronts. This is before that wave develops. Now, it's particularly across many southern and western areas of the UK where we'll see the most intense rainfall on Wednesday. And actually, once this cold front pushes through, we could see some what's called line convection, an intense band of very strong winds and a heavy downpour move through. So that could bring some fairly high totals. There's a bit of respite. It's a pretty short-lived affair through the early hours of Thursday before that wave pushes up to the across central areas of England and across Wales again. It's South Wales once again seeing some of the heaviest rain. As I said, there's some uncertainty with how this wave works and plays out. So it's to do with how much of a feature it becomes. If it's a fairly flat feature, there's just a small kink, then basically the rain will continue to stream up from the south, pretty similar in a way to what we saw on the weekend, where you see the rain continually affecting the same area, which would bring probably some more intense downpours to parts of South Wales, depending on the exact position. But if we see this area of this wave become more of a defined feature, that could pivot the rain a little bit more consistently round, bringing pulses of rain. So we won't see as much persistent rain in one area falling. So that could bring slightly lower impacts. That's one we're watching, and we do have some really sensitive areas, particularly parts of Cornwall, South Wales. People are really starting to travel around for Christmas as well. So we're going to see probably further disruption through the rest of this week. There are warnings in force for Wednesday and Thursday as well. That's not the only thing going on Thursday. As if that wasn't enough, we've also got this occlusion. It's a completely separate feature actually that pushes in from the Atlantic, and we could also see some line convection developing on this feature. It moves into Northern Ireland and Scotland at first, quite a nasty feature as it does, could bring some heavy downpours once again to South Wales, southwest England, and then it becomes a weaker feature as it pushes into the east. Then we're into showers for Friday across northern areas, quite strong winds actually. We could see gusts of 40 miles per hour across northwestern areas in those showers. A few showers across parts of the southwest, but nothing compared to the rain we're expecting through Wednesday and Thursday. Pretty dry day across eastern areas. And then Saturday, that's that next weather front. It comes through on Saturday. It's a pretty repetitive story, but it's an important one because, as I said, lots of people are travelling around and we are seeing some impacts from all this rain. So this weather front pushes through. It is a really narrow band, but again, it could bring an intense period of heavy rain. Now, we'll just put a few more details onto the rainfall for you, just to see how those rainfall accumulations start to build up throughout the week. So Wednesday, the broad area of low pressure, you can see parts of western areas. It's sort of southwest Scotland, northwest England, North Wales, South Wales, parts of Devon and Cornwall, particularly Dartmoor's being highlighted as well, seeing rainfall totals around 40 to 60 millimetres. And then on Thursday, that waving front just tops things up. This is how the rain's accumulating day on day, so you can see where it's going to be building up. And once again, it's very similar areas. We're starting to see 100 millimetres, in excess of 100 millimetres by Thursday. Friday's a dry day, so there's very little change. Then Saturday just could be the final nail in the coffin for all that rain. So a lot of people are going to be on the roads on Saturday. So we are keeping keen interest on how the rain is doing. And I think it's just worth being aware that there is going to be delays to trains in particular, as well as a lot of water on the roads. So some quite dangerous driving conditions. So if you're not travelling, make sure anyone you know who's travelling is aware. So yes, more rain to come this week. As I said at the beginning, though, there is a little light at the end of this tunnel that could come just in time for Christmas. We are hoping here. We've had a fairly consistent trend, consistent signs for the pattern to finally shift, for low pressure to be a thing of the past and high pressure to move in for the rest of December, most likely actually, starting this weekend. Now, it's still a couple of days away. There's still a few differences on exactly where that high pressure could sit, and that does have knock-on effects to what the weather will bring, particularly over the Christmas period. But it does mean with high pressure moving in, that will put a cap on any of that rainfall. It will keep the jet stream at bay, and it does mean that we will see some dry weather. Now, before I show you the most likely setups, I'm just going to show you kind of why that is starting to move in. Now, as I said, we are seeing at the moment a very mobile jet stream. That's because we've been driving a really strong temperature contrast between on the eastern side of the Atlantic, on the western side of the Atlantic, we've got a sharp contrast in temperatures. So I'll just put the air mass temperatures on here. You can see where we have this strong contrast of cold to warm, that's where you get the intense jet stream. And as we know, we've had some really, you may have heard, there's been some quite exceptional snowfall across parts of New York just this week. So it's still cold there, but that is set to change. I'll just turn the jet stream off. Now, through the rest of this week, there we go. From Friday onwards, we get this low pressure system moving up, and that starts to drag the warm air just slightly further north. You can see that warmer air by the weekend starting to build up just further north across the Atlantic. And as if I could go on with this time, which I can't, you could see that warm air continuing to build up. And what that will do is start to build the higher pressure over parts of Europe and just generally across parts of Scandinavia as well by the time we get to the weekend. And that is going to block systems moving in from the west, and we're going to be starting to be influenced more by that high pressure rather than the low pressure. So there's a few different scenarios of what high pressure will be most dominant in our forecast. So we can just got to find this which one we're going to look at. There we go, we turn that one on. That's what we're looking for. So this is for this week. So let's have a look for next week. There's Christmas Eve. Let's find Christmas Day. Oh, we missed it. There we go. So these are the three most likely scenarios for Christmas Day. The most likely scenario actually is 49% chance. So it's pretty high confidence that we're going to see this change from low pressure to high pressure, and 49% chance at over a week away is pretty high confidence compared to usual as well. But the slight differences between these will bring some subtle differences to the weather. So this one shows high pressure just centred pretty much across the UK, just slightly over the Irish Sea, the north and the north of the UK. That will bring in sort of northerly winds really, and high pressure dominating, so that's going to really reduce any precipitation across the UK at all. Or the most likely, or the second most likely, is for high pressure to be more centred over Denmark, more over Scandinavian high, and that would bring in more easterly winds, and some more western areas would be closer to the area of low pressure, or potentially some showery weather. These are only 12% notice as well, but I think we're looking at these to get a general idea of what the setup's going to be. The third one, though, is a high over northern France. So that would give us more of a southwesterly wind, a slightly milder direction. So all of these show high pressure dominating the weather, and most slightly colder than average, but nothing exceptionally cold. So there is a very low chance of any widespread white Christmas at all at this time in any of these outcomes. And even if we do see an easterly or a northerly wind, what we can expect is a general downtrend in temperatures. That was the decider output. We can also have a look at the ECMWF ensemble output. So that's when we run the models multiple times and we look at the various outputs that we are expecting. And the spread in the different outputs gives you an idea of confidence or the idea of potential solutions. So this is for the pressure over the next 2 weeks. So this over the next 10 days, sorry, this takes us up to Christmas. And you can see if I move around the map, all of those lines are pointing upwards, pretty much all of them. So actually, if we look further north, so that's northern Scotland, the scale shows higher pressure, a higher number on the scale, and all the lines are pointing upwards. As you go further south, particularly more southwestern areas, at least into the start of next week, there are some that still have lower pressure actually dominating. So I think confidence is higher for more northern areas that we're going to see higher pressure dominating into the Christmas week. And across the east as well, it's a similar story to the west. A lot of the lines are trending upwards. As I said, it is quite high confidence we will see higher pressure dominating as well. So what does that mean for the weather? Well, as I said, high pressure means less rainfall as well, as the winds can also be lighter, which can lead to colder nights, a risk of frost, and also a risk of fog as well. How cold will it be? Or we can use these ECMWF lines to look at the temperature as well. As I said, if we get in that easterly wind, we're not going to be tapping into really cold air. There's not really any particularly cold air anywhere around us, so we're not going to see a sudden cold blast even any of those directions. But we're moving away from a southwesterly most likely, which is a very mild direction. That's why we've seen such mild weather at the moment. And we are going to, whatever the outcome, we will see temperatures most likely go onto a downward trend. And you can see that here. I'll move the dot around the map as well. It's a little bit messy. The lines go up and down because it's warmer in the day than colder in the night. So that's why we're seeing that diurnal range. That's why they're going up and down. And all of them are generally on the downward trend. Some of them going quite cold actually, but a lot of them just staying in those sort of low single figures all the way through until Christmas. It's worth noting tonight, actually, there's a real dip on there. We're going to see a really cold night quite widely, particularly this evening. So we are expecting it to turn much colder across, turn colder than it is at the moment by the time we get to Christmas. And we will see a change from the very unsettled weather we've got at the moment to much drier and colder, as well as more settled weather through that Christmas period. So there is some rain to come this week. As I said, we do have warnings in force through the rest of this week. Please check out our website and app if you want any more details on them. So there's continued risk of flooding. Lots of rain still to come when everyone's travelling around, but hopefully this is some good news that there will be some dry weather in time for the Christmas period. A lot of people have it off, and I'm sure you are hoping to have some outdoor plans to meet up and enjoy the festivities. That's all I have time for today. As I said, if you've got any questions, make sure you leave a comment and we will try and answer them in the Weather Studio Live this Friday. But thank you so much for joining me. Please share this video with anyone else you might think would be interested. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.